And when it comes to climate change particularly, this is what I'm most pissed off with News Corp about. People like Andrew Bolt, Chris Kenny.
What a moron.
They are people who are out of step with popular opinion. Now, a majority of people in this country believe that we do need action on climate change. You've got Andrew Bolt writing on a daily basis that it's a hoax, it doesn't exist. The amount of coverage that those views get, and then unfortunately they get perpetuated among people who aren't as interested or aren't as driven to find out for themselves. So they just start parroting the same old denialist crap.
Yeah, well, the thing is, nowadays, everything's fed off an algorithm. So people might go and read the newspaper and agree with a point that Andrew Bolt came out with, and then they'll go on Twitter and Instagram and YouTube, and probably YouTube is the best example rather than the other two, and then they'll watch more climate denial or right wing or whatever it is. I'm not just using climate change, but I'm using that as the example.
Yeah.
But and then they'll get fed more of what they like.
Yeah.
There's no getting fed, and it's all through an algorithm.
Yeah.
It's all autoplay. So there's so much YouTube that people watch.
Yeah.
This is one of the other problems I think that with news is you don't get the other side because for one, there's people like Rupert Murdoch who own 60% of the newspapers in Australia. So, and then two is the algorithm problem. So, but didn't there used to be laws against owning that much of the newspaper and like fair laws against
cross ownership laws? Yeah, I mean you couldn't own more than there were various things like you couldn't own a paper in the same city as a major free-to-air TV network, or there couldn't be a total monopoly. Those laws were basically thrown out by, trying to remember which government it was, but, in the fairly recent past. In fact, it might have even been Turnbull. Might be recent that relaxing that allowed a further concentration of media ownership. So the diversity of opinion is even narrower.
Yeah.
And you mentioned social media. Like I'm big. I love Twitter. Way too much time on Twitter, but Facebook to me is a cesspit. That is where your craziest sort of alt-right conspiracy theories emerge and are given licence and are spread far and wide. And we've seen in the example of the US election in 2016 how big an impact the spreading of fake news, like genuine fake news, had on that election result. So things like that, the contraction of the media and media moguls having too much power, all those things sort of nip away at the fabric of healthy democracy. And that's another issue I see with this country now, that the range of opinion is so narrow now, and I think we risk having the fundamental principles of our democracy eroded because not enough people are being given the information they deserve to be able to access.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, isn't it? History is written by the winners or the people that own the rights to print the newspapers. You know what I mean? So it's fascinating to me that because Facebook, for example, have gotten in trouble in the past for pushing their own agendas. Twitter cancel people in the hard right, but they won't cancel anyone in the hard left because they're a leftist-leaning, media organisation. And these are the biggest media organisations in the world. Rupert Murdoch it's not a social media platform, but he owns, obviously, all the media in Australia. So surely, like, just to skip forward 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, surely there's got to be some mechanism that is put in place that stops this from happening. Because if you control the news, you control the people, really. That's part of controlling the society, the culture and the society.
Well, I tend to think it'll happen more by sort of osmosis than by legislation.
Yep.
Murdoch, look, it feels like he's going to live forever. He's not going to live that much longer. But Lachlan, the son who's going to sort of take over, a lot of people say that his politics are even worse. But I think, the media has such an issue now generating enough revenue that I think there may not be a lot of those sort of mogul type organisations. They may divest themselves of enough media interest because there's no money in it.
Yep.
So like News Corp, for example, have poured a lot more money into entertainment, Fox Studios and TV and stuff like that, and they've got out of a lot of newspaper stuff. And the newspaper stuff they hang on to and the sort of pure media stuff they hang on to tends to be sort of a vanity project type thing, which, for example, the Australian newspaper, which has been going since 1964, it's always run at a loss. But Murdoch has been prepared to sustain the losses because he wanted to have a national broadsheet. You know.
What does a national broadsheet mean, just so I know? Because I don't really know what the difference is.
A broadsheet is just the size of the paper. So, in fact...
Like the Age used to be.
Yeah. I mean, in fact, I think the Oz might be the last surviving broadsheet in this country. That's just the size.
Okay, cool. Is there any difference?
In what, the size?
I know that there's a size. I know the size difference.
Quality?
No, just in like the way, say you read a broadsheet, you read the old Age, or you read like, is there any difference in the way like that, or is it just a paper that's printed on bigger paper?
Yeah. I mean, well, obviously the layout's different depending on the page. I mean, there was a philosophical thing that broadsheet papers were more serious and appealing to a more intellectual audience than
what people always
tabloid.
thought of the Age compared to the Herald Sun, obviously.
Yeah. But, I mean, the difference, don't get me wrong, I love the Age, I love my time there, but even in terms of content and audience, there's the gap between the Age and the Herald Sun has been vastly reduced. They're not that different newspapers now.
Yeah, that's interesting. So... And you were telling me before the show, so we've gone right down this rabbit hole, so we may as well stick around here for a little bit longer. But